Okay, so with such a deep, rigorous discussion, you don't have any doubt. Huh? Okay, so you have some doubts. Okay, so that is good to know. So can we just start addressing the doubts first? I'll start Plato. Okay, or before Plato, I'm going to talk about the Athenian setup. But before coming to that, I would like to address all the doubts that you have. Any doubts? Huh? You were saying something, you had doubts? No, 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 we are going to clear it. Okay, so just let me know what you're thinking. Yes, with time, all things will be clear, but you can just. Hmm. Okay. Hmm, hmm, hmm. Okay, yes. We are talking about scholars who are trying to interpret, let us say, Plato. Yes, definitely. Ah, yes, by this time, we are actually having the scholars who are actually uh, who are using multiple methods, no doubt about that. Yes. Okay. Any other question? Any other question? Okay, so yes, our discussion actually covered everything related to this approach, yes or no? And here we are going to start this political thinker in our lecture 3, that is the first political thinker, that is Plato. Okay, so how we are going to approach any thinker, any particular philosopher that we are going to study? Firstly, this is the strategy that we'll be having for every chapter. So firstly, there will be a blueprint. Okay, so that blueprint will give you about the outline, or you can say it is just the outline that how we are going to approach a particular philosopher. Okay, so I would like you to just note thing. Okay, I will dictate the whole blueprint. Okay, just 1 or 1.5 page blueprint, and then we are going to approach as per that blueprint. Okay, so just write down the outline, Plato, blueprint or outline, how we are going to say this particular philosopher, and we are going to have the same for everything on every topic. Okay, so first write down first point, space and time. Plato is space and time. Space and time. Second heading, influences. Influences. So influences on Plato. Under this subheading, write down Pythagoras. 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 Same Pythagoras. Pythagoras theorem. Okay. Next is Heraclitus. 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 Next is Parmenides. This is the blueprint, okay? And last, you can just include Socrates. Socrates. Then write down the third heading, that is methodology. Methodology. So under methodology, write down first point, dialectics. Dialectics. Then second point, deductions. Deduction or deductive methodology. Deduction. Third is teleological method. Teleological method. That is teleology. Fourth is analogy. Fourth, analogy. Okay. Now the next heading, okay. Write down perspective. Perspective. Perspective, oblique, school of thought. School of thought. Okay, so what is the meaning of this? That means from which school he is coming. Okay, so under this write down a school of political idealism. Under this write down a school of political idealism. Next heading, important works. Important works. So under this write down Republic. Next Crito, CRITO, Crito. Next Apology. 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 Then statesman. Statesman. Then laws. 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 Next heading, important ideas. Important ideas. So under this write down sub points, theory of forms. Theory of forms. Oblique ideas. Next write down. Next point, ideal state. Ideal state and institution of philosopher king. Then next, thoughts in statesman and laws. Thoughts in statesman and laws. Last point, second last point, write down current relevance. Current relevance. Last point, evaluation and criticism. Okay. So from here onwards, we are actually ready to embark on our journey, okay, of our syllabus precisely. And this is the, you can say, blueprint of all the things that we are going to cover. Okay. A cursory look of all the content that we are going to get. Now it will be there for all the topics. So this is how we are going to do, okay, things. Now coming to the first point here, that is space and time. When it comes to this philosopher, it becomes all the more important actually. Space and time is going to be important for every philosopher, because if you recall our discussion previously, the discussion that we had yesterday, we approached to study all the methods or the important methods, and there we understood that how textual method was not enough, how contextual method was also not enough. And then we saw Tully pointing out that yes, contextual method is useful. Yes or no? If you recall the discussion, contextual method is useful as it is going to help in better understanding the things. But to say that it is the method, or it is the context alone which is going to give the correct meaning, that is not the correct way to approach any text. And then Skinner added what? Skinner added linguistic context. Okay, and what was also talked about was this, that is, it is also important to understand what is the dominant political tradition, okay, of any thinker. For example, I told you that linguistic tradition में मैंने आपको बताया था, I told you about the meaning of the word virtue, okay, or virtue, how that has changed with time, and what Machiavelli meant by that word virtue. Okay. Now we are going to give a little bit more time what we are going to do with respect to the time and space of any other thinker, because here when it comes to Plato, we are also going to study after this Aristotle. Okay, and when we study Plato, actually we are going to see the ideas of Socrates, his master. So understand that these three actually belong to the same tradition. These three thinkers, ऐसा कम ही होगा आपको आगे आने वाले thinkers में. So they belong to the same setup, and they are going to inherit the same dominant political tradition of that era. Getting it? So all the same, the common elements of that political system, of that socio-economic and political system actually is going to influence them. So we are going to see the space and time of Plato in slightly more detailed manner than we will see for other thinkers. So yes, if it is about Plato's space, so you know that it is Athens. I might be knowing that it is Athens. So Athens is the Greek city-state, okay? It was the Greek city-state. Now, in order to locate Athens in that Greek history, we need to take a little bit deeper look into the history of Greece, okay? तो ग्रीस की अगर हिस्ट्री देखेंगे, बहुत जल्दी देखते हैं इसको. तो ग्रीस की हिस्ट्री है, आप इसको डिवाइड कर सकते हैं in this period. For example, we are talking about this period, let us say, BC. So this is Miocene period, okay? Mycenaean period. Mycenaean period. And from 1100 BC to 700 BC, there is Dark Age. 700 BC to 480 BC, this has been called the Archaic Age. And then 400 BC to 320 BC, this is called Dark Age. This is called Classical Age. So Plato was born in 427.28 BC, belonging to which age? Classical age. Yes or no? This age. Now this period is completely irrelevant. Okay, this is too old to consider in political science. Something is started happening significantly in this particular period, Archaic Age. Okay, so Archaic Age में क्या हुआ कि Greek city-states actually started colonizing the area. Okay, so this is the time where majority of the Greek city-states are actually oligarchic. Okay, because here at this point of time monarchy prevailed and that it started changing into oligarchy. So monarchy and somewhere oligarchy. So what is monarchy? Monarchy, you understand? Monarchy is the rule of one. Yes or no? Oligarchy, rule of few who are wealthy, okay, who are able to attain power because of their wealth, because of their political connections, like this. Okay, now there is another word called aristocracy. Okay, so how do you define aristocracy then? Again the rule of few, but those individuals who are going to rule in aristocracy, they have this noble birth. Okay, so they are the people of highest class in society. In oligarchy, that connection of being of noble birth is not necessary. So that is the difference. Okay, so this archaic case में क्या हो रहा है कि many oligarchies are emerging, and Athens is also one such state where we saw aristocracy. Okay, अब इसमें बहुत ज़्यादा नोट करने के लिए नहीं है, लेकिन ये जरूरी है. This is important to contextualize Plato in this particular time period. Athens is aristocracy in this time period. Now aristocracy is slightly different from oligarchy, but in both form of government it is actually few who rule it. Okay, and then in that particular age something happens. For example, there are people like Solon, okay, then others who try to bring about certain reforms, because when they become part of oligarchic rule, some of them started bringing about certain reforms in the direction of making it democratic, making the rule democratic. Okay, so that is happening in this phase. Athens is also going to witness the same transformation, and by the year 500 BC it is going to emerge as democracy. Okay, 427. अब थोड़ा सा देखो इसको, मैं इसमें थोड़ा सा पर्टिकुलर हूँ टाइम पीरियड में, क्योंकि हमें बहुत अच्छे से समझना है कि प्लेटो किस टाइम पीरियड को एड्रेस कर रहा है. ओके, सो 400 you saw that various Persian invasions started happening over the Greek city-states in and around this time period. Okay, so there was the attack of Darius, King Darius, in the 490 BC. Okay? Now, in that attack, Athenian army defeated the Persian army. Okay, it is about the same battle that you might be knowing, the Battle of Marathon. Okay, here this person who ran after the victory of Athens ran from this particular place marathon to Athens, जिसके ऊपर ये marathon race होती है. Okay, getting it is about 42 kilometer of distance. So that is the distance of this place between Athens and Marathon. The Battle of Marathon इसी को बोला जाता है. Okay, 490 BC में हुआ था. Just after 10 years after 490 BC, 480 BC में होता है Battle of Thermopylae. You might have seen this movie 300. King Leonidas. हाँ? King Leonidas है ना, जेरार्ड बटलर ने प्ले किया है उसको. तो किंग लियोनाइडस वो स्पार्टा का किंग था. ओके, स्पार्टा, another very important Greek city state. So there also the son of Darius, Xerxes, got defeated by Sparta. And just after this, there has been another war, and also captured by another movie, the sequel of 300, Rise of an Empire. Yes or no? Stephen Sullivan ने उसको play किया, Eva Green. You might be knowing about this movie. तो उसमें क्या हुआ? This army this time of Xerxes was defeated by Athenian navy. Getting it? So this is the time period of constant attacks, Persian attacks over Greek city-states. Okay. Now you might ask me that what makes Athens so special here? Athens is special because of his size, big size. Okay, so it was actually 4 to 5 times bigger than the average Greek city-state. And when it comes to population, the population was actually 10 times more than the average Greek city-state. So both population as well as area, Athens was much bigger than other Greek city-states. Getting it? Now, against this backdrop, when Persian attacks are happening, Greek city-states are going to form groups. They are going to call it. They are going to form groups. Now, retrospectively, that have been called leagues. Okay. तो एक डेलियन लीग करके बना. That was led by Athens. Many leagues were formed, but with time, after the attacks stopped, these two leagues actually persisted. One was the Delian League, that was led by Athens. Athens is a Greek city-state and a significant Greek city-state, important Greek city-state, and league will consist of many other Greek city-states. Because understand that by the starting of the classical age, you have around 1500 Greek city-states. Okay, so modern day Greece and the Mediterranean coast, 1500 Greek city-states. So Delian League led by Athens, and then there is Peloponnesian League led by Sparta. Okay, so two leagues persisted. Again, these leagues are going to be the groups of states. Okay, and what impelled them to come into these leagues? Persian attacks. Now, after the time, Persian attacks will stop, but some leagues will continue to exist. Okay, so this league was led by Sparta, this league was led by Athens. Now understand the time period of Athens, and we are again going to come back to this particular time where these two leagues are going to fight against each other in a 30-year war, which you might be knowing is called Peloponnesian War. Getting it? Peloponnesian War. You might have heard it. Okay, if you haven't, then we are going to learn about it. Now, before I come to that point, just know a little bit about Athens. So Athens, firstly, a significant city-state because of size, because of population, was a democracy. So what kind of democracy that was? Can I just compare it with the democratic system that we have today? A comparison can be made, but yes, there were differences. Athens was a kind of democracy which was classical in the sense that it was a lot more democratic than the others Greek city-states that were existing at that time. कैसे मैं कह रहा हूँ कि a lot more democratic, if not completely democratic. इसमें हुआ क्या कि there was a population of around 3 lakh people, okay, by this time 500 BC में, and out of these 500, approximately 50,000 were considered as citizens, not less than 50,000. Okay, these were people who were 20-year-old male, getting it? And they were not slaves, they were having some property, so they were considered the citizens. Okay, strict criteria. You are going to learn about Aristotle's idea of citizenship that was quite close to what prevailed at that time. And these 50,000 people constituted the citizenry of Athens. Rest 2.5 lakh people did not were not called citizens. And then Athens had very strong institutions of democracy. Okay, so what were the institutions of democracy there? We are talking about a Greek city-state in 500 BC. Okay, just keep that in mind. So there was this assembly. First institution assembly. It was called ecclesia. Ecclesia बोलते थे इसको. Okay. Ecclesia का ये रूल था कि there were meetings and all 50,000 citizens actually are going to become part of that assembly. All are going to participate in the assembly. So in the meetings there is always a quorum, yes or no? Quorum होता है meeting में कि without that minimum number you are not going to conduct that meeting. So there also there was a quorum. So more than 10% of 50,000. So 5,000 से ज़्यादा मतलब 6,000 के करीब quorum था. So if 6,000 people are there, they are going to participate in the meetings. Now in those assembly, there used to be voting also. So they used to discuss. They used to discuss, for example, whether to wage war or not, whether we have to send this army to that particular place or not. They used to discuss the prices of grains, okay, everything. And while they used to discuss, the motions were moved, okay, and then people are going to speak for or against, just like this podium here is there. So people are going to raise hand, they are going to be called to speak. These all 50,000 citizens, okay, getting it? And after this, they are going to vote. And how they are going to vote? They are going to vote by raising hands. Okay, everyone among those 50,000 citizens was allowed to speak anything, okay, for or against. So freedom of speech, you can say. They have full freedom to criticize. So definitely a very democratic body. Getting it? Very democratic body. Now, assembly में इतना ज़्यादा insistence था participation में कि if you used to arrive late in the assembly, then there was fine. You have to pay fine because you are late in the assembly. Okay, so that is one institution. The second was council. Council was another institution. So what was council? It was the council which was actually a permanent body. It was a permanent body. ठीक है? So that permanent body actually consists of 500 people, 50 from all the 10 tribes. Okay. Now 50 from all the 10 tribes are going to constitute it, and then the members are going to be replaced every year. So you can just compare it with a permanent body that we have, Raj Sabha, Council of States. And this particular body actually acted like a standing committee. Okay, you have these standing committees now. So what they do? They does a lot, all about, they scrutinize the legislative process. They also set the agenda, yes or no? So this standing committee used to set the agenda for this assembly. Okay. And then there were various rules. For example, no one can become the member more than twice, or like this. Okay, but they ensured through some rigorous set of rules that people participate, and that participation is very systematic. Getting it? And this is happening in 500 BC. Okay, 500 BC. So it's not a surprise that the Western political thought is given such importance, yes or no? Because they were experimenting with such rigor or detail, yes or no? तो इसको देखिए अब what do you conclude about these institutions? Were they able to generate or create a real democratic process? But just compare the assemblies. If you are arriving late, then there is a fee. Now it doesn't depend. It does not depend upon this whether you belong to this class or that class. So regardless of your class, I'm talking about those 50,000 who were the citizens. Regardless of your class or social status, you are going to speak on this podium. You can just oppose anyone, because before this democracy there were offices which were more powerful. Okay, there, for example, the office of archons, and those offices persisted, but this democratic process actually disempowered them. So those offices were weakened with time. ऐसा भी हुआ वहाँ पास. Okay, so all the offices which were oligarchic or somehow in root form monarchical, they were weakened with time and were replaced by these institutions. Just compare with all the prevailing system of that time, oligarchy and all. Okay, aristocracy. This was a lot more democratic. Yes or no? So, firstly, we should give that much credit to these institutions. They were actually democratic, no doubt. Okay, assembly कोई भी आके बोल रहा है, कुछ भी बोल रहा है, किसी को भी oppose कर रहा है. This is a very good democratic practice. This is still what when we ascribe the essence to the word democracy, this is what we mean. Okay, all the right to differ. Yes or no? This is how you define democracy. It gives you the right to differ. Okay, so yes, they were democratic, but definitely the democracy as we understand it, for example, now we have come to understand that universal adult franchise is one of the most essential feature of democracy. So in the standard, it may not pass all the test, definitely, but when it comes to comparison with other forms or the forms of government prevailing at that time in other Greek city-states, it was a lot more democratic. Democratic premises have been questioned by many scholars also. Okay, so for example, last thinker. So she pointed out this flaw in the system, that 50,000 people are actually ruling. But how they are able to rule? They are able to rule because there are slaves who do the other task, and then these people, these citizens, come to have that leisure that they can just devote it to state affairs. Getting it? So it is because of those slaves they are able to rule. And then she is going to point out in her own theory that we are going to study in detail later, that the task that slaves were doing, that is something that is not quite reflective of the human freedom. Okay, so humans are capable of more than that. Animal labor on is the word that she uses. And those who take part in the political process, she uses the word June politican. Okay, that means something that corresponds to the human freedom, reflects to the human freedom. So that is the actual action as she defines it. So Hannah Arendt has looked on this history, and this has inspired, this division has inspired her to come out with his own theory. Okay, it also attracted the attention of Karl Marx and Engels. Okay, Friedrich Engels. So Karl Marx again is some scholar that we are going to study. So Karl Marx said, and Engels also, that just see that how those citizens are going to work. They are able to work only because of these slaves. So Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels are going to see this same process with some different perspective. They will conclude that, see, what is important? Important is this work that slaves are doing. That is making the work of citizens possible. Slaves are doing all the work, and all the benefits are being reaped by citizens. Okay, Also understand that from same premises, two different thinkers are going to conclude differently. You should notice that. Getting it? So this is the democratic institution and the democratic setup that you must remember while we are talking about the age of Plato and Aristotle and also Socrates. Also understand that the Athenian democratic experience and also the experiment is so important that when it comes to Western political thought, some scholars say that it is simply a response, a reaction to the democracy that prevailed in Athens. Okay, what does it mean? When Karl Marx looks at it, he is reacting. When Anna Arendt looks at it, she is reacting. Okay, Western political thought is actually reacting to the Athenian democracy. Okay, some thinker will appreciate, others will criticize, but they are reacting. Okay, so it's not a surprise that Socrates, Plato, and then Aristotle are also going to react to Athenian democracy. So, how Socrates is going to react? Socrates, the thing that is going to influence him a lot is this assembly, where everyone is allowed to speak, okay, in favor or against, as per his or her wish, his wishes, not her wishes actually, because women are not going to become the citizens here. Okay, so they were excluded from this citizenry. Socrates is going to emphasize on the free speech, on speaking your mind, and that was quite reflected in the institution of assembly. Plato is not going to like it that much and will compare this assembly with some beast which has gone haywire, out of control. Okay, so that is going to be reflected in his theory, in his thought. And then Plato, after also going to react to this democratic institution by making his theory of citizenship contingent upon this ability to rule and also ruled. हम जब एरिस्टोटल को पढ़ेंगे तो वी आर गोइंग टू स्टडी हिज थ्योरी ऑफ सिटीजनशिप. तो उसमें एसेंशियल क्राइटेरिया ये है द एबिलिटी टू रूल एंड टू बी रूल्ड. All things that you might have studied on your own regarding the slaves, position of wealth, all that is that derivative of this ability, that is ability to rule and to be ruled. Getting it? So how that is reflected there in Athenian democracy? The same people, 50,000, are being ruled and also ruling through these institutions. Getting it? So this is a picture of Athenian democracy emerged in 500 BC and remained democratic for next 200 years, only with brief period of interruptions. Okay? Getting it? Now just keep that in mind and going back to our discussion there when we Plato's time specifically. So Plato का कौन सा time है? 427 8 BC. This is the time of birth, and this is a time where Peloponnesian War is going on. And this was a war between two leagues, yes or no? Delian League led by Athens and Peloponnesian League led by Sparta. Also understand Sparta. Sparta is a significant Greek city-state. So the second largest in terms of area and population after Athens. Okay? With its famous military tradition you might be knowing by the movies and the literature. Okay? ये दो phases में होता है. It happened in two phases. The first is the phase 431 BC. See, these dates are not that much important, just trying to contextualize Plato. Okay, and that is the first phase. This is the first phase, and this phase actually concludes with the stalemate. Stalemate. No one is the conclusive winner. And then comes the second phase, 415 BC to 404 BC. Danelian League, led by Sparta, was conclusively defeated. Okay, not only that, Athens faces great devastation. It was completely devastated by this particular war. So this is the time period of Plato. And in these particular years, this particular year, democracy for a brief period of time in Athens is replaced by oligarchy. What is being said? Democracy in Athens in these first and second is being replaced by oligarchy. Okay? Now just keep these things, this understanding in mind. So when Peloponnesian War is happening, democracy is prevailing there in Athens, and Athens is devastated, not only defeated, but devastated by this war. Plato, being a person from a noble family, from an aristocratic family, is very much concerned about the state's affairs. Okay? He is very much interested in the welfare of this particular city state. That means he is very much involved in the welfare. Getting it? Now, as I said, that he's from the noble family. In this particular time period, when democracy is being replaced because it was defeated, Athens was defeated by Sparta, this replacement comes by the rule of 30 tyrants. 30 tyrants. मैंने बोला आपको कि डेमोक्रेसी रिप्लेस होती है इस पर्टिकुलर पीरियड में जब एथेंस हार रहा है at that moment democracy again is going to be replaced by 30 tyrants, rule of 30 tyrants. Okay, so it was rule of by 30 tyrants. It was a tyrannical rule, and these 30 tyrants were actually backed by Sparta. Sparta, the opponent. ठीक है ना? तो उनके द्वारा बैक किया गया था. अब बताओ. Now within a year, after the defeat of Athens, within a year, democracy returns. Okay, a democratic rule returns in Athens. I told you that it has remained democratic from 500 BC to 300 BC, and after the year of rule of 1 year of rule of 30 tyrant, democracy returns. And when democracy returns, then set of measures started. A particular mission started, and that mission was actually to pursue this revengeful punishments. Because in this particular time period, many Athenians also became part of this particular rule. Actually, it was actually the rule by Athenians, but those Athenians were backed by Sparta. So the allegations were made that many Athenians were colluding with Sparta against the interest of Athens. Now this is interesting that this is a time period, as I told you, that Plato is from the aristocratic family, so he was also called to become part of this 30 tyrants rule. But there at that moment, under the influence of Socrates, his master, he denies to become the part of that rule. Okay, although you also should notice that he had some political ambitions in his life. So he was having some political ambitions, but there at this moment, when he was to make this particular decision, he chose philosophy or wisdom over rule. Okay, over becoming part of this rule of tyrants. Now, something surprising is going to happen. Democracy is going to replace tyranny here. And then when these measures will be taken to punish all those who colluded with Sparta or who became somehow the factors for the downfall of Athens, his master Socrates was also punished. Okay? And with charge of polluting the minds of youth there in Athens. Okay? Punished with what? It was a capital punishment. Getting it? It was a capital punishment. We are going to see that story again when we are going to discuss some of the Plato's ideas. Now, this again, एक तो हार एथेंस की, defeat, And the second is this execution of his master. Now this is going to completely be a devastating experience for Plato also. So he was shocked to see the wisest man in Athens ending like this. Yes or no? वो लूज कर गया लाइफ और इस तरह से लूज किया कि एक डेमोक्रेटिक इंस्टीट्यूशन ने एक डेमोक्रेटिक रूल ने उसको मरने पे मजबूर किया. This is going to give him a lot of shock and surprise, and he's going to leave Athens for a time. Getting it? So this is the time period, this is a space and time in which Plato is philosophizing. Are you getting this? A democratic setup, then war, and then some collusion with Spartans coming out with rule of 30 tyrants, and then replaced by democracy, and then democracy ultimately giving this punishment to his master Socrates. Okay, so this is the space and time. Now just write this. मैंने explain जो किया है, the most essential points. Take dictation, proper dictation. Okay, so write down Plato. Plato was born in an aristocratic family. Time and space. Okay, Plato was born in an aristocratic family. Write down the year 428, 27 BC. Initially in his life, he had political ambitions. Later on, he gave up his inclination towards rule and chose to pursue philosophy. Philosophy. Okay, you understand the meaning of philosophy? Philosophy, philosophia, love for knowledge. Okay, that is called philosophy. Next line. This was a time when Peloponnesian War was going on. Between the Delian League, led by Sparta and Peloponnesian League led by Athens. Delian League led by Athens and Peloponnesian League led by Athens and Peloponnesian League led by Sparta. The war concluded. With the victory of Sparta over Athens. Sparta over Athens. The war completely devastated Athens. The war completely devastated Athens. Okay. Next, I know. This event was followed by another shocking event for Plato, where in a series of revengeful punishments, democratic rule in Athens gave capital punishment to his master Socrates. To his master Socrates. Okay. Now understand that many things will also be clear when we are going to see the influence. But there at this moment, he is actually perplexed by this efficacy of the democratic rule also. Okay. But before democracy, what prevailed there? Tyranny for 1 year, and before tyranny, again democracy. This was a time period when some of the philosophers, for example Pythagoras, they also started making some secret societies. Okay, so Pythagoras maintained a secret society, elitist brotherhood that was called. Okay, तो secret society का क्या काम होता है? They don't trust this existing political setup much. Okay, so Plato was influenced by these thinkers also. Pythagoras was actually a philosopher, a mathematician, philosopher, and many other thinkers, many other philosophers. They were having this the attitude of distrust towards this political rule that was prevailing, because they were of the opinion, somehow they were thinking that those who know better than others, they should be ruling, they should be in that position. These were the philosophers and thinkers, and they could see very easily the deficiency of knowledge in those who were ruling. So Plato was also influenced by these thinkers, and he saw that the defect is there in the system, in the very system, uh, where those who are less capable, mainly in terms of knowledge, are actually ruling. Okay, and then he also pointed out that it is actually the basic reason behind all the corruption that is prevailing in the regime. Okay, so this defeat of Athens, execution of his master, all that is because of this corruption. And this corruption is because those who are ruling are not actually capable of ruling because they don't have that much knowledge. So how this ill of society can be treated? Ensuring that who are capable to rule should be ruling. Okay, only the men of knowledge should be ruling. Getting it? Who are the men of knowledge? Philosophers, those who love wisdom. Yes or no? Those who love wisdom over anything, just like Plato himself. Because he chose philosophy over becoming part of that 30 tyrants rule, although he was invited to be part of that. Okay, and thus he also concludes that until philosopher becomes kings or kings learn philosophy, there is no end to the predicament of human life. Okay, so that is how he concludes in this time and space. Okay, so write down further that Plato analyzed the causes of defeat of Athens in the war. He also he also found flaws. He also found flaws in the democratic setup in Athens, and was in complete shock as this democratic rule was responsible for execution of his master. Next line, he noted deficiencies in various spheres of Athenian political setup. Full stop. Next line. Plato identified that rulers in the present setup are not capable of ruling political setup are not capable of ruling. Next line. Thus, the evils in the society will not end unless the capable ones become the rulers. Next line. Plato wanted to establish an ideal state. Plato wanted to establish an ideal state, right, in bracket, also an ideal society, and the government. Next line. In this context, he he comes to the conclusion that until philosopher become ruler, or rulers learn philosophy, there is no end. There is no end to the predicament of human life. There is no end to the predicament of human life. Okay? That means the problems of human life. So understood the background in which he has started thinking. It is very natural on his part not to have very good opinions with democracy also. Yes or no? And just recall that assembly that we were talking about, ecclesia. What he called ecclesia to be? A giant, a beast which has gone out of control. Okay? Because again, those kind of assembly, ecclesia and boule, that is council, it is those assemblies and council which have been responsible for execution of Socrates. Okay? तो उसने देखा कि भाई यहाँ पास लोग, क्योंकि होता क्या था कि एथनियन डेमोक्रेसी में इवन द कोर्ट्स यूज्ड टू गिव all the access to the people. That means people in general, citizens in general, participated in the courts, the very courts, just जहाँ justice होता था, वहाँ भी लोग ही participate करते थे. Okay, so it is that democracy with all these institutions, ecclesia and boule, assembly or council, जिसने ये किया, सोक्रेटिस को capital punishment दे दी. ठीक है? Now see the next part, that is influences. Okay, so influences में there are many. The first is Pythagoras. So Pythagoras, you know that this is, you know as him as a mathematician, Pythagorean theorem. Okay, Pythagoras has was not just a mathematician; he was actually a philosopher, and he was a pre-Socratic philosopher, that the one who existed before Socrates. So he has come about with many philosophies. So, for example, philosophy of numbers. Okay, so what was philosophy of numbers? Philosophy of numbers actually conveys that he saw the world uh, with this mathematical precision. He could point out that there is a mathematical precision kind level, a level of mathematical precision in the universe. That means universe is so complete or so precise as you see in case of numbers. मतलब समझ रहे हो इस चीज को कि when it comes to numbers you identify a system. Yes or no? You identify a complete system. It is systematic. You can just count from 1 to 10, 1 to 100. Okay, what it shows? A system, an order. Yes or no? He could see the same order in the universe. And this order in the universe denotes what? Denotes an absolute reality. Okay, so where in Plato this is reflected, this orderliness, this existence of absolute reality. This existence of absolute reality is going to be reflected or is going to resonate with his theory of forms, where he is going to depict a world of absolute reality. Okay, so Pythagoras ka theory of philosophy of numbers. Write down that Pythagoras first philosophy of numbers. Write down in this philosophy, Pythagoras projected the idea of an ordered universe that is that is the existence of ordered universe, that is the existence of an absolute reality with with mathematical precision, with mathematical precision and and system, mathematical precision and system. This resonated with Plato's theory of forms, Plato's theory of forms, where about Plato also talked about an absolute word, ideal oblique absolute word, ideal or absolute word. Next line. Plato, in his theory of forms, Plato in his theory of forms says that there is an ideal word, there is an ideal word which is the real word, and the sensory word, that is material word, is the reflection, is the reflection of ideal word. Okay, so this is philosophy of numbers. Now, another idea that is going to influence him is the harmony of spheres. Harmony of spheres. Again, harmony of spheres means an ideal word exists in harmony with real world. Okay, so right now he was also influenced by Pythagoras' idea of harmony of spheres. Harmony of spheres. Right on. Plato used this idea again in his theory of forms, where he depicted the universe as ordered ordered harmonious whole, ordered harmonious whole. Ordered harmonious whole. Okay, now see, another influence, it is actually, the list is endless, we are going to talk about the most essential. When it comes to Pythagoras, he was also the philosopher who subscribed to the idea of reincarnation of souls, transmigration of souls, okay, rebirth, immortality of souls. So Pythagoras talked about all this. Okay, and all these philosophers actually were thinking also in terms of a rule whereby the one who is capable of ruling should actually be ruling. Okay, so Plato's idea of philosopher king that we are going to discuss is something which is also going to be influenced by all these philosophers, not just Pythagoras alone. I'm talking about many philosophers who were of the view that these people should not be ruling. So I can say that the theory of transmigration of soul, immortality of soul, even the office of philosopher king, the idea of philosopher ruling the state, is also coming from Pythagoras. Okay, getting it? So right now that theory of reincarnation, theory of next point, theory of reincarnation, the transmigration of soul, immortality of soul, dash, all these ideas influenced Plato. Okay, now we are not just specifically talking about any particular theory because Plato will be talking about these things not only in theory of forms but in many ideas. Okay, but Phaedo is actually a particular work where he has discussed the immortality of soul, but that is not relevant. हमारे हिसाब से जो book relevant है वो सबसे ज़्यादा रिपब्लिक है. उसके बाद statesmen and laws, but some references of apology and creed are also going to be made. Okay, so that is Pythagoras. Right on next line, that Pythagoras also established a secret society, also established and was part of a secret society, showing distrust towards showing distrust towards the ruling setup. The ruling setup. Plato was also not satisfied. Plato was also not satisfied with the existing democratic setup of his times. With the existing democratic setup of his time. Okay, understood. So this is about the influence of Pythagoras. Actually, this is about some of the most important points. The influence is actually enormous. Next is Heraclitus. Okay, Heraclitus. Acha, Heraclitus, again, a philosopher who is known for many ideas, but these ideas are very important. So the first is doctrine of flux. Doctrine of flux. That everything is in constant motion, and which was summed up in his statement that yes, no one steps into the same river twice. No one steps into the same river twice. This shows the significance of him, of everything being flux. इसका मतलब क्या है बच्चा? इसका मतलब है कि you understand? No one steps into the same. For example, if you are going to step into this river again, it is not the same water. Yes or no? It is not the same water. So this shows the constant change. Change is the only constant. Okay, I'll dictate. Okay, just इसको पहले समझ लो. And where this is reflected, again, Plato's theory of forms. इसमें reflect होता है. Okay, we are going to see that theory, Plato's theory of forms. because there is this real word and ideal word, and then there is material word or sensory word. In the sensory world, things are constantly changing. That is precisely the reason why it is he calls this not to be real, because something which is real is going to be definite and is not going to change. Okay, so write on this, that from Heraclitus, Plato borrows the idea of things being in permanent flux, permanent flux, permanent flux. Okay, this is reflected in Plato's theory of forms. This is reflected in Plato's theory of forms, the sensory word, where the sensory word is constantly changing. Sensory word is constantly changing. Okay, now see, the next is doctrine of logos. So what is doctrine of logos? It is a universal principle that makes this word, okay, and this is reflected in Plato's idea of demiurge. Plato's idea of demiurge, that means divine artisan, the word being a makeup or a product of divine craftsmanship. There is some otherworldliness in Plato, okay? There is a reason why we are going to call him political, the school, the propounder of idealism, political idealism. So just bear with this scholar, because uh, many of his ideas will look like otherworldly ideas. इस चीज़ को समझो, क्योंकि वो बहुत ज़्यादा रियल या प्रैक्टिकल में बात नहीं करेगा, उसमें अदरवर्ल्डलीनेस है, एक मिस्टिसिज्म भी है प्लेटो में, ओके। और हम बच गए अगर आपको मिस्टिसिज्म पसंद नहीं आ रहा, क्योंकि हम उसके सिर्फ पॉलिटिकल फिलॉसफी को फोकस करेंगे, फिलॉसफी को नहीं। गेटिंग इट? सो डिवाइन craftsmanship or divine artisanship or artisan or craftsman. Okay, right on. Heraclitus' doctrine of logos also influenced Heraclitus' doctrine of logos also influenced Plato, which referred to universal principle of reason, which referred to universal principle of reason that guides the word, that guides the word. Next line. This resonated with Plato's Plato's conception of demiurge. Plato's conception of demiurge, 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 which meant a divine craftsmanship, a divine craftsmanship that shapes the world, a divine craftsmanship that shapes the world. Okay, divine, matlab word is the creation of divine, a divine craftsmanship. Next influence is of Parmenides. ओके, सो परमेनाइट्स में क्या आता है? परमेनाइट्स में आता है, फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल, परमेनाइट्स shows distrust towards senses, because he was of the opinion that senses lead to illusion. Okay, so how that is reflected there in Plato? Although we have not studied, but yes, it is reflected in Plato's theory of forms. Okay, so this sensory word is not real. This should not be trusted. Okay, things are not real in this seemingly real word. Getting it? Because how do we come to know about this word? Plato says only by our senses. That is why we are calling it sensory word. But senses, something that we come to know about through our senses, is will be full of errors. It is illusion. Getting it? So this is coming from Parmenides. Now understand that this, when it comes to this particular idea, Parmenides may be the most influential figure, okay, over his mind. But there will be others also. Getting it? Also understand, it is not all the ideas of Parmenides that are going to influence Plato. Because with respect to this particular idea itself, you must notice the difference between Parmenides and Plato. Parmenides was of the opinion that the sensory word is not useful at all. He actually completely rejected the sensory word, Parmenides, while Plato does not reject it. Plato considers the sensory word as a lower level of reality. So he actually criticized the Parmenides for rejecting the sensory word completely. Okay, so when we are talking about influences, we are actually talking about that particular thought which we see in Plato, which have which has already appeared before Plato. So that is why we are calling it influence. Doesn't mean that Plato completely agreed with all the ideas of Parmenides. That was not the case. Okay, Plato is actually known for criticizing Parmenides, for rejecting the sensory word completely. So write on this, that Plato, write on, Parmenides showed distrust towards senses, showed distrust towards senses. He said that senses lead to illusion. He said that senses lead to illusion and error. And error. Next line. Plato also showed skepticism. Plato also showed skepticism towards sensory knowledge. Towards sensory knowledge. Next line. This is reflected in his theory of forms, where he says that sensory word is the reflection of material word. Sensory word is a reflection of ideal word. Okay, getting it? So this is Parmenides. Just one more idea. Idea of one unchanging reality. Idea of one unchanging reality, that is, it is showing the idea of permanence. Permanence. Again, reflected in his theory of forms. तो आप कह सकते हैं कि हर एक चीज थ्योरी ऑफ फॉर्म्स में ही जाके इन्फ्लुएंस हो रही है, इन्फ्लुएंस कर रही है थ्योरी ऑफ फॉर्म्स को. सो प्लेटो का मतलब थ्योरी ऑफ फॉर्म्स ही है. All his other ideas, the major ones, will seem to be the derivation of that theory of forms. he will be expressing some other idea, completely different ideas in some other works, for example, Statesmen and Laws. But all is myth. तो Plato, जिसके लिए जाना जाता है, what makes him Plato and what makes anyone Platonic is his theory of forms. Okay, so that is why this is the most powerful idea among all the ideas. Okay, so these are, write on this, that Parmenides' idea of one unchanging reality also influenced Plato. Also influenced Plato. Write on. It was reflected again in his theory of forms, where he says that where he says that it is the non-material, it is the non-material abstract forms, it is a non-material, that is, which is not material. Okay, it is non-material abstract forms which shape the most fundamental kind of reality, which shape the most fundamental kind of reality, which shape the most fundamental kind of reality. Okay, now these are the three influences. But when it comes to the influence, the most profound of all is that of Socrates. Okay, so we are going to see this in slightly more detail that we have seen in Heraclitus or Parmenides or Pythagoras. Okay, so now coming to this, the most powerful influence over Plato, that is Socrates. So you must know that Socrates is his master. Getting it? Plato considers himself the disciple, the student of Socrates. Now I'm saying considers himself because there was no any school of Socrates, है ना? सोक्रेटिस की कोई स्कूल नहीं थी जिसमें प्लेटो का एडमिशन हुआ था, ऐसा नहीं था. वो डिस्कशन होते थे उसके, और बिकॉज ही Socrates was such, we are going to know about him. He came in contact, in interaction, in such interactions which Socrates used to have with common people, and there Plato found Socrates to be wisest among all Athenians. Okay, then he started considering himself as a student of Socrates. Okay, now Socrates के बारे में बहुत चीजें जानने के लिए, but one thing that you must notice first is this, that he is the founder of eudaemonist school of ethics or ethical theory. Okay, we are going to know about it. Eudaemonist school of ethics or ethical theory. What is that? Understand. So these are two same words, okay, spelled in two different ways. In this school, what is said, that the ultimate purpose of human existence, all you can say, that the purpose of all the rational acts of human beings is to pursue happiness. Getting it? Getting it? मतलब हम एग्जिस्ट क्यों करते हैं, या हमारे सारे के सारे रैशनल काम किस लिए होते हैं? क्योंकि हमें लास्ट में हैप्पीनेस चाहिए. ओके, दिस इज द ग्रीक वर्ड फॉर well-being that is resulting into happiness. Okay, Socrates is the person who is in his times changed the direction of philosophy. How? Because earlier, before Socrates, for example, philosophers like Thales and others, they used to focus more on nature, that how this nature works, what is the composition or the character of this nature. Socrates turned this direction and said that philosophers should focus on human conduct instead. Okay, philosophers should conduct, should focus on human conduct. They should focus on the question as to what makes a good life. Getting it? So that is what Socrates is doing. So firstly, turning the very direction of philosophy, asking the philosophers to focus more on this question of human conduct. Okay? अभी चांद तारों को छोड़ो, humans में focus करो. That is what he's saying. Okay? Humans के conduct को focus करो. ये बताओ कि what is good life. Okay? So what is a good life? A good life is one which gives you happiness. Okay? So all the rational acts of human beings are actually driven towards what? Towards attaining this happiness. A good life is one which results into the life of happiness. That is what he's saying. A good life is one that results into life of happiness. Understand this? Socrates, जैसा कि मैंने बताया कि सबसे important influence है, तो वही सब कुछ shape कर रहा है यहाँ पास. Okay? Now the question arises कि what will bring that happiness? How our life will be filled with happiness? So the question can be answered and counter question can be raised that will wealth make your life happy or you happy or bodily abilities or health you can call it or power or status, will all these things make a person happy or your life happy or your will all these things, for example health, wealth, power, status, bodily pleasures, will that give you happiness? That is a question. Socrates responds that it is the virtues which gives happiness, which brings a good life. Okay? अभी उसने कुछ नहीं बोला है वेल्थ पावर को लेके, उससे पूछा तो क्या बोला उसने कि what brings happiness? Virtues brings happiness. Now he is not denying what you just stated. जो आपने अभी अपनी टोकरी में लाया ना, पावर, हेल्थ, वेल्थ, ये उसको डिनाई नहीं कर रहा है, वो आंसर कर रहा है कि what brings happiness. Socrates' answer is virtues brings happiness. It is a virtue that makes a life a good life. Virtues. Okay, there is a lot to know here. So virtues will bring happiness, or it is a virtue which makes life good life. Good life bringing happiness. Okay, and by virtue what he means. So before he talks about virtues, he talks in general. Socrates started answering this question, this particular quest, with a general approach by saying that everything in the nature has a purpose, has a role to play. Okay? He is identifying, he's just explaining what is virtue here. So, for example, there is this stylus that I'm holding. The purpose of this stylus is to write, okay, on this particular panel. The purpose of sword is to cut the body, yes or no? That is what a swordsman is supposed to do in a war. The purpose of kitchen knife is to cut the vegetables. Getting it? Now, purpose of purpose or goal of kitchen knife is to cut the vegetables. Getting it? And how the vegetable is going to be cut by knife? By the sharpness of knife. Yes or no? So if the knife is not sharp, it is not going to perform its purpose, its task, its goal. Its goal will not be attained. Getting it? So what helps the knife to attain its goal? Sharpness. then sharpness becomes the virtue or excellence that is required in case of knife to do cutting. Getting it? And the purpose of life is good life, happiness. So again, it is a virtue that is going to help individual to attain happiness, to attain good life. So virtues help you to attain good life. Getting it? Virtues help you to realize your purpose. He is explaining the virtue, and virtues are excellence which help in virtue or oblique help, excellence help in achieving good life, which you can call happiness. That is the purpose of good life. So virtues do what? They help in realizing the purpose, help or essential in realizing the purpose of life. That is happiness. Okay, clear? But not done. He has a lot to say here. Now, virtues. They are the excellence, just like sharpness is going to help knife to attain its purpose. Virtues are going to help people to attain their purpose, that is good life. Now, asking about the nature of virtue, that is, uh, how is there one virtue or more than one virtues? In order to answer this, you must understand the tradition here, dominant tradition. You recall that? The methods, dominant tradition. There is already a tradition in Greece that is existing before Socrates, which helps Socrates to come about with this conclusion. Okay, and what is that particular tradition that we are talking about? The tradition of Greece is this, that they they actually believe, the Greeks actually believe that people are capable of, they have been given this capacity to inculcate virtues. They are capable of inculcating, developing virtues in them. Okay, and there are four cardinal virtues that Greeks believed that people are capable of attaining. I'm saying people are capable of attaining. Whether they have it or not, that is a question. The tradition says that people are capable of attaining four cardinal virtues, divinely ordained four cardinal virtues. This is how the nature has helped humans. Okay, and what are those cardinal virtues? Four cardinal virtues. It is wisdom, courage, temperance, justice. Four cardinal virtues. So, how Greek tradition used to have this belief? As I said, that Greeks used to reflect on life other than others, at least in that particular period. So they could see that humans are less powerful when it comes to lions, when it comes to elephants, when it comes to wolves. So bodily power जो है उनके पास कम है. Okay. So how they're going to survive? They cannot survive on their own. An individual cannot survive on his own. So they have to start a group living. But group living will require what? Group living will require some kind of virtues which could promote or which could inculcate the spirit of cooperation. Getting it? Which could inculcate the spirit of cooperation. So they could just, um, in a group now, they are able to fight against lions, elephants. Getting it? So these are the virtues which helped people to start cooperating with each other. They start cooperating with each other, and they could just, you can say, they could start living together, and that is why they could ensure their survival against the animals which were more powerful, bodily power. Getting it? They again were able to deter the animals which were more powerful and started living life in a city. So now they again started fighting among themselves. Now, when they are able to deter the animals, now they have started fighting among themselves. So again, the virtues will be required so that they could just ensure their sustainable existence in a cooperative manner. So what makes them capable of living a cooperative life? It is the virtues. More specifically, their capability to attain those virtues. Okay, in a way, Greek tradition has it that people are already capable of attaining these virtues. So Socratic idea is not completely new here. He is taking this from the already existing tradition in Greece. Summarize Cisco? Coming back to Socrates now. When it comes to the nature content of virtue, the question was posed to him, okay, what is the nature of this virtue? Is there one virtue or many virtue? So the tradition has it that there are four cardinal virtues. Socrates says that there is a unity of virtues. Okay, so there is a unity of virtue. Unity of virtue means all virtues actually exist simultaneously. Socrates subscribes to the idea of unity of virtues. And what is the reasoning that he provides? He he provides this reasoning. He says that see, a man of wisdom will also be courageous, will also exercise temperance, will never be indulgent. A man of wisdom will never be coward. He will be courageous only. He will also be having a temperate life. He will not live excessive indulgent life, and he will be just. So these all virtues actually make whole one. Yes or no? They exist in unity, in unison. That is what he means when he says that there is unity of virtue, because a wise man is going to be courageous and temperate and just also. Okay, so you can just write also unity of virtue. A wise man, a man of wisdom, is also courageous. Courageous, temperate, temperate, and just. Okay, now understand that when this is so, then the natural question arises that how that virtue is to be attained. Tradition has it that people are capable of, doesn't mean that people are already having those virtues. Getting it? A wise man will be a man who is having the virtue of wisdom. According to Aristotle, will also be the man who is going to be courageous, who is going to be just. So a wise man cannot be unjust. A wise man cannot be coward. Getting it? Now the coward is one who is who is not wise enough to understand the virtue of courage. So it is out of his ignorance of the virtue of courage he is coward. What makes that person coward? Ignorance of the virtue of courage. Getting it? Summarize Cisco. So this is how he subscribes to the idea of the unity of or unison of virtues. समझ रहे हो? हाँ? देखा था कल परसों का लेक्चर? ओके, ठीक है. So for virtue, what is important? For virtue, important is the knowledge of virtue. Knowledge of virtue. So the coward is one who is ignorant about the virtue of courage. So when he will have the knowledge of virtue, he will have that virtue. Getting it? So in that sense, virtue is the knowledge of virtue that leads us to conclusion that virtue is knowledge. Virtue is knowledge. To be understood synonymously, with knowledge is virtue. Okay? But the question actually remains that how that knowledge is to be attained. Okay? ये particular knowledge कैसे attain किया जाए? How the person who does not have the virtue will come to have the knowledge of virtue and thus virtue. Okay? Because in order to have virtue, what is important is the knowledge of virtue. Knowledge of virtue. So there is this method to attain that knowledge. We call it presently to be the Socratic Elenchus. क्या बोलते हैं उसको? Socratic Elenchus. So what is Socratic Elenchus? This actually means cross verification. Cross verification, or you can say examination. Cross verification or examination, cross examination. This is an established tradition now, Socratic Elenchus. Okay. So Socrates was infamous for adopting this particular method. Okay. So he used to roam. Socrates के बारे में और जानिए आप कि we do not know any work written by Socrates. He did not believe in writing books. Okay. Because he thought that knowledge ऐसे pursue नहीं किया जाता कि आप ओपी गुआवा बुक ले आए और उसके बाद पढ़े ऐसा नहीं नॉलेज गेन करते नॉलेज गेन करने का तरीका क्या है डायलॉग ओके dialogue in that dialogue questioning the premises so he used to roam around and he was infamous for that तो सोक्रेटिस आ रहा है तो लोग किनारे हो जाते थे कि यार आ रहा है अभी पूछेगा कि व्हाट इज जस्टिस हाँ ओके पूछेगा कि व्हाट इज ब्यूटी तो व्हाट इज ब्यूटी का क्या आंसर होगा तुम सुनाने लगोगे दिस इज ब्यूटी और दिस इज जस्टिस और जो तुम बोलोगे जैसा कि अभी यूपीएससी में इंटरव्यू में होता है जो तुम बोलोगे उसी को सोक्रेटिस पकड़ेगा उस प्रीमाइस को क्रॉस वेरीफाई करने के लिए सो यू विल से दैट जस्टिस इज इन द इंटरेस्ट ऑफ द स्ट्रॉन्गर हाँ या फिर बोलोगे जस्टिस इज समथिंग व्हिच एक्चुअली टेक्स केयर ऑफ द इंटरेस्ट ऑफ द वीकर तो फिर सोक्रेटिस बोलेगा कि okay so that means justice has no place for those who are strong getting it so questioning the premise the counter then you will say yes it is also in the interest of stronger तो बोलेगा okay only stronger and weaker what about those who do not consider themselves to be stronger or weaker is it not about them what about animals समझ रहे हो इस चीज को he is questioning cross verifying or cross examining the premises and pointing out the inconsistencies there okay so pointing out the inconsistencies and finally making you look like fool है ना my finally making you look like someone who does not know what is justice still getting it मतलब सोक्रेटिस का कहना ये है कि भाई पहले तो ये जानो कि तुम नहीं जानते हो that is the point of starting point that is a starting point to acquire knowledge okay question the premise whether you know things or not. Okay, and he also used to say that I know only this much, that I do not know, I do not know anything. ये मुझे पता है ना? ये स्टार्टिंग स्टेज है किसी चीज को जानने की, नॉलेज को परस्यू करने के लिए, है ना? आप इस चीज को जानते हैं. ऑल्सो रिमेंबर दिस, जब आप यूडेमोनिया की स्कूल पढ़ रहे हैं तो जस्ट कीप दिस इन माइंड दैट GS4 डिमांड है ना, यू विल बी यूजिंग दैट ऑल्सो इन GS4, यूडेमोनिस्ट स्कूल ऑफ एथिक्स, जहाँ पास हैप्पीनेस की तरफ लीड करना है. लेकिन आप ये समझिए कि व्हेन Socrates is talking or becoming the founder of this Eudaemonist school and defining the happiness in terms of the virtues, he also has been able to solve a big problem of humanity whereby happiness has been pursued in non-zero sum game, in form of non-zero sum game. Means if I have to be happy, I will get a rank in UPSC exam only when someone else does not. Yes or no? Getting it? ऐसा होता है कि नहीं? आप हैप्पीनेस को कई बार ऐसे डिफाइन करने लग जाते हैं. तो आपकी हैप्पीनेस किससे आएगी नॉन जीरो सम गेम में? ये जीरो सम गेम में कैसे आएगी? किसी की अनहैप्पी होने से. तो आपका पॉजिटिव हुआ, उसका नेगेटिव, जीरो सम गेम. वो सब्सक्राइब करता है एक नॉन जीरो सम गेम मैकेनिज्म को. So what is happiness? Happiness is the pursuit of virtues. Okay? Now if one becomes the virtuous, is he going to do anything which is not in favor of the others? No. That will be very much in favor of others also. This is because happiness, there is nothing the pursuit of nothing but the pursuit of excellence. Getting it? To gain those virtues is not at all uh, leading to any kind of loss to others. So he has been able to solve this problem of humanity also with this theory. ओके अपने यूडेमोनिस्ट स्कूल से वो क्या सॉल्व कर रहा है कि एक के हैप्पीनेस को परस्यू करना एक इंडिविजुअल के लिए दूसरे के लिए कभी लॉस नहीं होगा वो. ओके, सो आल्सो नोटिस दिस एंड यू विल बी यूजिंग दैट इन GS4 आल्सो, that pursuit of happiness doesn't mean that it has to come at the cost of someone else's loss. Socrates has solved this problem. Okay, so this Socratic Elenchus asks you to verify, cross-examine the premises and locate the inconsistencies. Locate the inconsistencies. And this, which you also call dialectics, is the way to attain that knowledge. Okay? Of what? Knowledge of virtues. Okay? Knowledge of virtues. तो ये knowledge कैसे attain किया जाता है? ये knowledge सोक्रेटिक एलेंकस के थ्रू, जैसे क्रॉस एग्जामिनेशन के थ्रू, क्रॉस वेरिफिकेशन के थ्रू अचीव किया जाता है. ओके, डायलेक्टिक्स के थ्रू, इसको डायलेक्टिक्स भी बोलते हैं, डायलेक्टिकल मेथड. अंडरस्टैंड नाउ दैट व्हेन वी से दैट virtue is knowledge, this is also the first premise of Socratic theory of knowledge. Socratic theory of knowledge, or Socrates' theory of knowledge. Okay, which also translates into knowledge is virtue. How? Because knowledge is the knowledge of virtue. This actually means that there are things, or there are things which are good. Okay, they are good in objectively real sense. there are things which are good. Good मतलब अच्छा, virtue. In objectively real sense, इसका क्या मतलब होता है बच्चा? This, they are objectively good, not subjectively good. If there is wisdom, you will know that there is wisdom. That is what Socrates is saying. There cannot be any other interpretation. So good exists in objectively real sense. Good exists in objectively real sense. That means just understand the word objective and subjective. What makes anything objective? Certainty that there cannot be just two interpretation. Be more objective in your assessment. That means more certain. Objective type of questions. That means there will be only one correct answer. Getting it? Subjective means multiple interpretations are possible. It may be biased also, inclined also. Getting it? That is not how you define objective. Just opposite. Objective, subjective. So when someone says that good exists in objectively real sense, that means what? There are things which are good for certain. Getting it? No double interpretation whether that is good or not. No counter question whether that is good or not. So good exists in objectively real sense. Now understand, when those things exist in objectively real sense, that means they are certain. And if they are certain, they can be known. They can be known because they are certain. If they would not have been certain, then there is a question whether you can know it or not. But they exist in objectively real sense, that makes them certain. And because they are certain, they can be known. They can be known. Okay, so good exists or virtue exists in objectively real sense, and that is why virtue can be known. That means the knowledge of that good can be attained. Knowledge of that good can be attained. Knowledge of good can be attained. That means knowledge of virtue can be attained, because virtue or good exist in objectively real sense, and if it exists in objectively real sense, it is certain. Anything which is certain can be known. Okay, if it is not certain, there is a question whether you can know it or not, but if it is certain, it can be known. And that is why knowledge of virtue is possible. If knowledge of virtue or knowledge of good is possible or can be attained, then good or virtue can be attained. Good or virtue can be attained. Okay, but the link is knowledge. Okay, and for knowledge there is Socratic 𝐒𝐿𝐵𝐴. Yes or no? Cross examination, cross verification. Okay, now this Socratic theory of knowledge is actually directly linked with Plato's theory of forms. Plato's theory of forms. Getting it? It is so much connected that when you study Plato's theory of norms, actually it is a reiteration of theory, Socrates' theory of knowledge. हम इस चीज़ को देखेंगे जब हम उसको पढ़ेंगे तो अभी हमें methodology discuss करनी है. Okay, so just take notes, dictations on this. Okay, you have noted these things, Socratic 𝐒𝐿𝐵𝐴's, all these terms. Okay, okay, right on. Socrates' theory of knowledge. Socrates is the founder of Eudaimonist school of ethical theory. Founder of Eudaimonist school of ethical theory. Okay. Eudaimonis theory stresses on or emphasizes on the cultivation of virtue or excellence. The cultivation of virtue or excellence. I don't. Eudaimonist principle states that happiness is the ultimate goal of all rational human actions. Rational human actions. The question is, next line, the question is how happiness can be attained. Socrates says that it can be attained by the life of virtue. By the life of virtue. What about someone who says that, what about wealth, health, bodily pleasures, social status, economic status? Tell me, if you have really understood Socrates, what Socrates would have responded to. So that is what he's saying, that this is all material thing. So is he asking you to become a monk? तो फिर कितना डोमिनेंट है आपके अंदर इंडियन ट्रेडिशन. दिस इज मटेरियल. हाँ, नहीं सर, प्लेटो भी तो बोलता था मटेरियल है ना, मटेरियल है और ये नॉन मटेरियल है. टेल मी एनी सेन माइंड. सोक्रेटिस की बात क्या है, वो बहुत सेन, बहुत लॉजिकल है ना, बहुत लॉजिकल है. वो अदर वर्डली बात नहीं कर रहा है. प्लेटो है उसका शिष्य. ही इज गोइंग टू बिकम अदर वर्डली. Socrates is very much grounded. He's asking the philosophers to focus on human conduct. Forget about these stars and suns and plants. है ना, ये ह्यूमन कंडक्ट के ऊपर फोकस करो. तो भाई उसका क्या आंसर होगा हेल्थ वेल्थ को लेके? हाँ हाँ, क्या बात है, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. Until and unless they are not uh, they are in conformity with the virtuous life, that means they are congruent to virtuous life, they are very much in line with the virtuous life, no problem with that. They are going to increase your happiness. Getting it? समझ रहे हो? तो एक wise man will pursue power. A wise man will pursue good health. Getting it? But if wise man will not pursue power in treacherous manner, that is what he's saying. So treachery is not the conduct, is not a virtuous conduct, and that is why it is not going to lead to happiness. Again, it's significant for GS4. ओके, क्योंकि वो रिमाइंड कराना इसलिए जरूरी है कि मैंने बोला है आपको कि दिस इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट फॉर GS papers also. Getting it? So Socrates is of the opinion that be it wealth, health, social status, economic status, as long as they are very much in line with a virtuous life, all these things are going to increase your happiness. Okay? Nothing wrong with them. The problem is when you adopt treacherous life, non-virtuous life, to pursue wealth, to pursue health. ओके, समझ में आ रहा है कि नहीं? तो फालतू के अगर आप कुछ अपनी बॉडी में करने लग जाओगे, है ना, आर्टिफिशियल हार्मोन्स वगैरह लेने लग जाओगे अपनी मसल्स को बनाने के लिए, तो आपको हैप्पी लाइफ नहीं देगा. दैट इज व्हाट ही इज सेइंग. ओके, समझ रहे हो? बहुत इंडल्जेंट लाइफ, इंटॉक्सिकेंट्स को यूज करोगे तो वो हैप्पी लाइफ नहीं होगी, क्योंकि ये टेम्परेंस एज अ वर्च्यू के खिलाफ है। प्लेटो को आने देंगे बाद में। आप, मुझे पता है आप टेम्परेंस वम्परेंस सुन के वही याद आ रहा है, ठीक है। यहाँ पास सोक्रेटिस है, ये 4 कार्डिनल वर्च्यूज ग्रीक ट्रेडिशन इसको रखता है। प्लेटो ने जिस चीज की बात की थी वो एक डोमिनेंट वर्च्यू की बात की थी, है ना। Existence of virtue in unison is a feature of human being. This is there in the Greek tradition. What Plato said was about the dominance of one particular virtue. Okay, समझो इस चीज को। So this is about his opinion on wealth, health, and other things. So next, write down. According to Socrates, all things have a specific purpose. Virtue enables a thing. Virtue enables a thing to attain its purpose. To attain its purpose, oblique to perform its role. To perform its role. The purpose of life is happiness. The purpose of life is happiness. And Socrates says that virtues help in attaining the purpose of life. Helps in attaining the purpose of life. Okay. Next, write down. Socrates also believes in the unison of virtues. In the unison of virtues, unity of virtues. He says that a wise man will also be courageous, temperate, and just. Okay, write down in bracket. Subscribing to the idea of the existence of subscribing to the idea of existence of 4 cardinal virtues in Greek tradition. 4 cardinal virtues in Greek tradition. Next line. Socrates further says that something which is not virtuous is going to is not going to lead you to happiness. Is not going to lead you to happiness. In that sense, happiness becomes synonymous. Happiness becomes synonymous with virtuous life. Right on. Socrates also says that things like health, wealth, power are not irrelevant. Full stop, comma. They can also increase the happiness so long as so long as they are in accordance with so long as they are in accordance with virtues. Next, write down. It is important to notice Socrates' contribution in the context of making the pursuit of happiness a non-zero sum game a non-zero sum game. Okay, right in bracket, non-conflictual, bracket close, as one's perusal of happiness, one's perusal, P-E-R-U-S-E-L, one's perusal of happiness does not does not cause app does not cause the unhappiness for the others. Does not cause the unhappiness for the others. Next, write down. The next question, next line. The next question is how to attain the virtues. Write down. Socrates says that virtue is to be attained by the knowledge of virtue. Next line. A man of wisdom will be just. A man of wisdom will be just, and if he is unjust, it is because of his ignorance. It is because of his ignorance. So the acquisition of virtue is about, so the acquisition of virtue is about the acquisition of knowledge of virtue. Okay. In that sense, virtue is knowledge, and knowledge is virtue. Knowledge is virtue. Okay. Next, write down. Virtue is knowledge and knowledge is virtue. That is your subheading. Write down. By virtue is knowledge, what is actually meant is that there are things which are objectively good. That means good exist in objectively real sense. And that is why the knowledge of that good is possible. Next line, knowledge of objective good is also objectively real. Objectively real. Okay, full stop. This knowledge can be attained through dialectics. Okay, dialectics. Right in bracket, cross examination. Okay, right in bracket. Also put the oblique there. Socratic Elenchus. Socratic Elenchus. Socratic Elenchus. Okay, समझ इस चीज को? Clear है? Now this gets connected to the theory of forms, whereby the one who has knowledge has come to acquire this knowledge of objectively real things, and those objectively real things actually correspond to the word of ideas. Okay, objectively real things will be good, they will be real, and real is actually what is real in Plato's theory of forms. It is ideal word that is real. Okay, so ideal word is real. We are going to see that in theory of forms. तो नॉलेज का मतलब क्या है? नॉलेज का मतलब उस रियल चीज को जो ऑब्जेक्टिव सेंस में रियल है, ऑब्जेक्टिव सेंस में रियल है मतलब कि वो चेंज नहीं होगी, उसको जानना. ओके, वो कौन जानता है? वो जानते हैं जो क्रॉस एग्जामिनेशन क्रॉस वेरिफिकेशन को अच्छे से कर पाए. क्रॉस एग्जामिनेशन क्रॉस वेरिफिकेशन का ही नाम है डायलेक्टिक्स. ओके, समझ रहे हो? तो दोज हु आर गुड इन डायलेक्टिक्स will be able to know that real world, there the things do not change, they exist in objective form. Okay, there are no 2 3 interpretations, because all these are the feature of material world. Okay, which is not real, which is not objective. Sensory word is not objective. This does not exist in objective relations. And also, for the same reason, virtues also exist in ideal world. Okay, so the idea of justice is going to exist in ideal world. All the virtues exist in ideal world. It is only accessible to those who have the knowledge of ideal world. Okay, it is the philosopher who knows the ideal world, and that is why he knows the idea of ideal state also, and that is why philosopher alone can actualize that idea on this material world. Okay, so this is how it is connected. We are going to see theory of form separately. समझ रहे हो? ये इतना ज़्यादा कनेक्टेड है कि वो एक्चुअली आप थ्योरी ऑफ नॉलेज को समझें तो थ्योरी ऑफ फॉर्म्स अपने आप समझ में आ जाती है. ये इतना ज़्यादा कनेक्टेड, बिल्कुल कनेक्टेड है. हम्म, कोई डाउट यहाँ पास? कोई क्वेश्चन आ रहा है सर समझ में? हाँ, कैसा है? अच्छा. मुझे तो बहुत अच्छा लगता है इनका ये थॉट्स. हाँ, बहुत ही ज़्यादा इंस्पायरिंग और बहुत ज़्यादा डीप. हालांकि जैसा कि मैंने बताया कि हम फिलोसफी में नहीं जा रहे हैं, हम सिर्फ पॉलिटिकल फिलोसफी में जा रहे हैं, तो एक्चुअली हम बहुत ज़्यादा सरफेस में बात कर रहे हैं. ठीक है. ये बहुत ज़्यादा डीप नहीं बच्चा, ये सरफेस है जिसमें बात कर रहे हैं, लेकिन ये सरफेस आपके लिए जितना चाहिए उससे ज़्यादा है. ठीक है ना? इट विल बी एनफ फॉर योर आंसर्स. ओके, कमिंग टू द मेथोडोलॉजी देन. methodology. So first is the methodology of deduction. Deduction. To understand deduction, deductive method is also called philosophical method. This is the method of philosophers. Okay, क्या होता है डिडक्शन में? डिडक्शन किसको बोलते हैं? डिडक्शन का मतलब होता है कि from particular to general. That means you are analyzing things, going to their particularities, and then you are deducing out of something, out of those things. Okay, deducing means you are forming a conclusion, a general conclusion, by analyzing the particular. That is a philosophical method. Deductions means from particular to general. That is deduction. Okay, that means what? डिडक्शन का रोल क्या है? डिडक्शन का रोल होता है कि यहाँ पास एक ऐसा आइडिया जो फिलोसफर ने अपने माइंड में रखा है जनरल वे में, वो एक, did I say from particular to general? Okay, I'm saying sorry for that. It is actually from general to particular. Okay, ये कभी स्लिप ऑफ टंग होता है मेरे साथ, देखिएगा इस चीज को. सो फ्रॉम जनरल टू पर्टिकुलर ऐसा होता है कि there is idea that the philosopher has, and then he is going to see that idea manifesting in particular cases. Okay, तो उसमें होगा क्या कि आपके पास एक आइडिया है. वो आइडिया क्या है? एक आइडियल स्टेट का. ओके, हमने फिलोसफर में देखा, प्लेटो में, कि he is having this idea of ideal state. So that is a general idea, the general idea that he has already having, and then he is going to realize that idea in particular cases. So for example, what is essential for an ideal state? For an ideal state, the ruler should be of this kind. For an ideal state, the education should be of this kind. For an ideal state, what is also required, that there should be conception of justice of this kind. Okay, so he had this idea of an ideal state, and then he is moving from that general idea of ideal state to particular cases, realizing that ideal. So how that is to be achieved? That is to be achieved by having this particular scheme of education, this particular conception of justice, these set of rulers, and this set of guardian class consisting of rulers as well as soldiers, also ensuring that these people who are artisans or farmers continue pursuing their trade activities and other things. Okay, and this is how this ideal state is to be realized. Okay, so deductive method is the method of philosophers. It is also called the philosophical method, and there the philosopher goes from general to particular. Okay, he is having a preconceived idea. You can't say, आप इसको ऐसे नहीं बोल सकते कि वो किसी ऐसे नोशन से को रख रहा है जिसकी वजह से वो बायस्ड हो जाएगा. इसका मतलब ये नहीं है. इसका मतलब ये नहीं है कि वो उसके पास जो प्री कंसीव्ड आइडिया है दैट इज गोइंग टू मेक हिम बायस्ड टुवर्ड्स एनीथिंग और अगेंस्ट एनीथिंग. दैट इज नॉट व्हाट इज बीइंग सेड. ओके, सो प्री कंसीव्ड का मतलब यहाँ पास बीइंग बायस्ड नहीं है. ओके, दैट इज व्हाट इट, दैट डज नॉट मीन दैट द फिलोसफर इज बायस्ड. सो फ्रॉम जनरल टू पर्टिकुलर, from general to particular, also called philosophical method. Philosopher has a preconceived idea which he seeks to realize by going into particularities. Okay, deductive methodology is reflected in Plato's political philosophy, in the idea of ideal state. Okay, idea of ideal state, which he seeks to realize in theory of education, in theory of justice. All that is in the institution of philosopher king. That is a general idea which he seeks to realize in institution of philosopher king. Scheme of education, conception of justice, okay, like this. तो ये क्या हुआ, ये एक पर्टिकुलर केसेस हुए. Scheme of education, philosopher king, school of education, these are all particularities. Are you getting this completely? Any doubt here? तो डिडक्शन क्या है, मेथोडोलॉजी समझाइए इसको. हम्म इस पर्टिकुलर चीज में डिडक्टिव मेथोडोलॉजी यूज हुई है. हम देखते हैं द मेथोडोलॉजी. हाँ बिल्कुल, बहुत जनरल से पर्टिकुलर. एक्चुअली deductive methodology is very much visible in Plato's theory, where he talks about these particularities while realizing his idea of ideal state. इसको ऐसे समझो कि डिडक्टिव मेथोडोलॉजी का मतलब कि आपको बाइक कोई पसंद आई. ओके, वो कहाँ बाइक है, वो आपके दिमाग में है, जिसमें 4 सिलेंडर्स हैं, 2 नहीं 4 सिलेंडर्स, ठीक है, और उसमें ये नाइट्रो बूस्टर भी है, और उसका कलर ब्लैक, और ये आप अपने दिमाग में सोच रहे हैं. गेटिंग इट. अब वो कहाँ है वो बाइक, वो आपके माइंड में है. अब आप गए स्टोर्स में, तो कावासाकी में गए, नहीं मिला. यामाहा में गए, नहीं मिला. फिर यहाँ सुजुकी में गए तो थोड़ा बहुत मिल रहा था. वो हायाबुसा टाइप कुछ खड़ा था, ऐसा जैसा आपने सोचा था, ठीक है ना, लेकिन इसमें नहीं था. तो अभी आप पर्टिकुलरिटीज में जा रहे हैं कि अब मैंने दिमाग में जो था उसमें उसको मैं कैसे करूं. तो आप वो ले आए वो सुजुकी की बाइक. अब आप जाके उसके पास मॉडिफिकेशंस करा रहे हैं क्योंकि नहीं मिला. ओके, तो कुछ उसमें था, कुछ नहीं था. फिर फाइनली आपने उस बाइक में क्या किया है, 4 सिलेंडर्स लगवाए, नाइट्रो बूस्टर लगवाया, पर्टिकुलरिटीज में जाए और अपने उस आइडिया को रियलाइज किया. यू फाइनली रियलाइज दैट आइडिया by going into particularities. Getting it? This is deductive methodology. So, who is capable of imagining such a bike with so intricate details? The one who is fond of bikes, yes or no? So, that is why it is called a philosophical method. This is accessible or used only by philosophers. So, at some moment of your time, if you have come across this particular thing, तो आप फिलोसफर हैं, है ना, कि आपके दिमाग में एक ड्रेस आई हो, या एक कुछ कपड़ा आया हो जिसको आपने ढूंढने निकल गए हो, नहीं नहीं उस तरह की जीन्स या ऐसा, है ना. तो उसको आप पर्टिकुलर सिचुएशन में ढूंढ रहे हो। प्लेटो ये कर रहा था, प्लेटो ने इमेजिन किया है कि एक आइडियल स्टेट ऐसा हो। अब उसको कैसे अचीव करेंगे, तो वो पर्टिकुलर सिचुएशन में जा जाके उसको ठीक कर रहा है, उसी के अकॉर्डिंग जो उसके दिमाग में आइडिया है ऑलरेडी उसको रियलाइज कर रहा है। सो एजुकेशन ऐसी होनी चाहिए। जस्टिस को ऐसे नहीं डिफाइन करेंगे जैसे तुम कर रहे हो, जस्टिस का स्कीम ऐसा होगा। ओके हम देखेंगे इसको, डिडक्शन को देखेंगे कैसे। मैं ये भी आप एक्चुअली क्या कर रहे हो, आप इन्फ्लुएंस पढ़ रहे हैं जो आप देखेंगे, मेथोडोलॉजी पढ़ रहे हैं जो आप प्लेटो में देखेंगे। ओके inductive methodology is completely different. There no preconceived notion, it is from particular to general. Okay, inductive methodology is from particular to general. That means you are investigating the particular cases, and that was shown in case of Aristotle, his disciple. Okay, induction, and then ultimately you are forming a general conclusion. Yeah, I have seen oligarchy, not good. I have seen aristocracy, not good. I have seen democracy, not good. Although this was good in oligarchy. So when I'm going to create polity, I'm going to have this particular feature of oligarchy there also. So that is inductive methodology, going from particular to general. So you did not have any idea of bikes, sir. Okay, you just started visiting the stores. तो कावासाकी की इस बाइक का आपको ये पसंद आया, उस बाइक का वो पसंद आया, और बाद में आपकी बाइक बनी दिमाग में, my ideal bike. That is inductive methodology. Getting it or not? Simple. So you will see Aristotle doing that in his theory. Okay? Although some claim that Plato has also been inductive. जैसे नेटलशिप करके एक स्कॉलर, उनका कहना है कि प्लेटो हैज बीन अडॉप्टिंग इंडक्टिव मेथोडोलॉजी आल्सो, नेटलशिप का कहना है। ओके समझ रहे हो इस चीज को? लेकिन उसका डोमिनेंट थॉट जो है वो डिडक्शन में है। हम देखते हैं हर जगह उस चीज को, आइडियल स्टेट को, खासकर रिपब्लिक में तो वो डिडक्टिव ही है। ओके नेक्स्ट राइट डाउन। यू वांट टू टेक एनी नोट हियर? इंडक्शन डिडक्शन वाला हो गया है क्या? डिडक्टिव मेथोड, जस्ट टेक द डिक्टेशन। This methodology is also called philosophical method. Philosopher has a preconceived conclusion. And seeks to see them in actual particular conditions, actual particular condition, actual set of particular conditions, around him. In this method, firstly, general principles are determined, and then are related to particular situations. Okay. Deductive methodology is seen in Plato's idea of ideal state. Plato's idea of ideal state. Dialectics you already understood. Cross verification. Okay. Dialectics also means thesis, antithesis, synthesis. वो बाद में आएगा. But here it is actually more about cross verification. So that is dialectics. Okay. We are going to see that analogy and all in the second class, and there we are going to start to study the major ideas of Plato. Okay, so we'll be starting with theory of forms. Okay, so just make sure that you revise it, everything. Okay, important है. And in the next class we will be able to answer the questions asked by UPSC. from the next class onwards. Okay, तो यूपीएससी ने जो क्वेश्चंस पूछे हैं उनमें भी हम बात करना कल से शुरू कर देंगे. Okay, any doubt, any question here? So you understood the setup, Athenian setup democracy का. Okay, there you saw that how Athenian democracy is going to become a topic of interest for whole Western political tradition, but इनके लिए तो कुछ ज़्यादा ही, Aristotle, Plato, Socrates. Okay, and then Peloponnesian War, that is going to influence him, is going to have lasting impact. His choice of wisdom over ruling or becoming part of 30 tyrants. Okay, and that is going to give you the understanding of the background from where he is coming. और उसके बाद ये सारी चीज़ें समझना बहुत आसान हो जाता है कि कैसे वो एक आइडियल वर्ल्ड को, आइडियल स्टेट को कंसीव कर रहा है और क्यों वो चाहता है कि एक रूलर जो हो वो एक फिलोसफर हो. ओके, ये इस कॉन्टेक्स्ट के साथ बहुत आसानी से समझ में आएगा आपको. Okay, the one thing that we will discuss in the starting of the class will be theory of forms. So revise this theory of knowledge. It is actually directly connected with that. Okay, so just make sure that you revise it. Okay.